been in various states of sickness. And I don't know if it's a change of the season or just one big dearth overall. It's good to have everybody here. We are in what I believe will be the last section of James. Maybe just for 10 minutes. We'll have to see how things go. But there's questions we need to try to deal with those too. So we've been talking about the triumph of faith, the outcome of having our faith and everything else, and the things that in our life that exhibit faith, the idea of a living faith, not a dead faith. And one of those things is patience. We develop patience because of our faith. Some of that is just waiting for Christ to return. Some of it is in the tasks that maybe God puts before us so that we can build patience. And the thing about patience is it makes us closer to God because God is patient. Okay, so we're developing the traits that God has as traits. That's the point of what James is trying to get across to us here. God's patient, so you be patient. God is loving, so you be loving. God is, whatever God is, work toward being that way. And God's going to help us out for that. And we can, as we've talked in the past, we can learn those lessons the hard way, and we can learn them the easy way. But whatever way it is, God really wants us to learn that lesson because He wants us to be like Him. So patience. He wants us to hold our tongue because we don't know the whole circumstance. And the anger of man does not accomplish the righteousness of God. Okay? So we need to hold our tongues. If it takes duct tape, so be it. So be it. In verses 10 and 11, he's gone over the prophets in Job, what had been done to the prophets in Job, the things that they went through. We finished up last week talking about oath-taking. Kind of went over that quite quickly, and I just made some point about military oaths, among other things. But the thing about oaths, God takes this seriously. Okay, that's the thing to remember. God takes oaths very, very seriously. So, since an oath is something, a promise to do something most likely in the future, and you have no control over the future, you got to be very, very, very careful about taking any kind of an oath. And Jesus said, let your yes be yes and your no, no. Anything beyond that, you can really get yourself in trouble. So, Gary.
He talks about in the Old Testament, it's better not to make an oath than to make one not.
That's right.
Don't do it.
That's right.
Don't be rash. Oh, I can do that. Really, like a man going to war.
Yeah.
1,000 against US 5,000. Be careful.
Yeah.
Be careful.
Yeah, unless I told you. They had that advantage back then, right?
Yeah.
They could go to a priest, they could go and ask for advice.
Yeah.
And say, hey, shall I, David, you see David doing that a lot. Shall I go up against them? Will I prevail? Yes, go. Sometimes David tried to do things without advice. I'm going to build a temple. And what was the next day it was like, no, not you. Not you. Okay, so these last 7, 8 verses, faith prays for the afflicted. So let's read 13 through 18 of chapter 5. Is anyone among you suffering? Let him pray. Is anyone cheerful? Let him sing praises. Is anyone among you sick? Let him call for the elders of the church and let them pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayer offered in faith will restore the one who is sick, and the Lord will raise him up. And if he has committed sins, they will be forgiven him. Therefore confess your sins to one another and pray for one another so that you may be healed. The effective prayer of a righteous man can accomplish much. Elijah was a man with a nature like ours, and he prayed earnestly that it might not rain. And it did not rain on the earth for 3 years and 6 months. He prayed again, and the sky poured rain, and the earth produced its fruit. So we start off with prayer. One of the things that faith prompts us to do is pray for those who are afflicted. And so prayer is a proper response here. It means a couple of different things. Suffering. Prayer is a proper response for suffering. Asking that suffering be alleviated. Sickness. Absolutely pray. Sins. Pray. In conjunction with confession, there are things that need to happen there. Okay, this isn't the exhaustive list of them. And then, you know, even ends up with an example of oppression there in the case of, well, the reminder is of Elijah, okay, and the things that Elijah went through. And we were talking, we went to a gospel meeting yesterday, and the point was Christian depression. And then the point was that, you know, there are times where there are low times in your life, okay? A good response to that is prayer. Okay? That's what needs to happen there. In the immediate example here of Elijah praying that it not rain, and then praying that the rain would come, those were effective things because God made them happen. And if we wanted to do a Bible study on prayer, then, you know, if we had to have, if we were to have a class on that, then it's probably something we could spend for 3 months. Because it's not a subject, and we're not going to do all of it. He does put in there, are you cheerful? Is anyone cheerful in verse 13? Let him sing praises. Okay? I'm not saying if we're cheerful, we ought not to thank God also in prayer. We should do that. But the more natural outcome for being cheerful and happy is to sing songs of praise to God. And a lot of those songs are almost a form of prayer when it comes right down to it. But just like being cheerful might lead us to sing of praise, then being less than cheerful, okay? Suffering from suffering, you know, sickness and sin and stuff like that, those things ought to prompt us to go to God in prayer. And I think that's the point that he's making there in the 13 and 14. So, again, it's a big subject there. Any particular points we want to bring out of 13 and 14 before we move on?
The cheerful thing almost goes back to the beginning of the book. It says, you know, you in trials, goes right along with the topic of, you know, cheerful, not cheerful. Calm delight.
Calm delight, yeah.
Yeah, or your,
Consider it all joy.
yeah.
Calm delight, yeah.
Joy, cheerful,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I think cheerful goes beyond joy.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, because cheerful can drag happiness into it,
Right.
where joy does not necessarily do so. But it also.
Suffering is not cheerful if you're
Yeah.
contrasting these
Right.
Okay. Verse 15. And the prayer offered in faith will restore the one who is sick, and the Lord will raise him up, and if he has committed sins, they will be forgiven him. Kind of brings up the topic to me of faith healing anyway, because it's kind of a topic out in the world there. James is giving advice to Christians of the first century, and so he kind of gets into something that I think others have misused. We might need to spend more time on the misuse than what the use actually is, but we can understand both those things together. Is verse 15 a guarantee that sickness is going to flee because we have prayed something? It's not. Okay, it's not. The idea of the prayer is that we are humbling ourselves before God, recognize that He is in a place to heal us if He chooses. How He does choose to do that may remain unknown to us. Okay? But the idea of the prayer goes back to humbling ourselves to the Lord, chapter 4, verse 10. Okay? Humble yourself. What does it say? Humble yourselves in the presence of the Lord. He will exalt you. He will lift you up. Okay? What's our tendency to think when we're sick? First of all, we're not thinking about others. Okay? When you're sick, you have this thing before you, whatever that sickness is. For Mike, suffering from throat cancer and everything else, that has got to be an all-consuming sort of thing. Okay? There are people that are not here today because they are sick. There are people here that are, here in spite of being sick. But that's one of those things. What's the tendency? What is their tendency maybe back in the first century? Well, yeah, you're going to die because there's really no effective medical help around.
Or you're being punished by God.
There you go. Because how did Job's 3 friends reply to his suffering? What was their reaction?
Really odd, something, that's like God punishes those who
Yeah. And God does punish the sinful. But it might not be right now. may be later on when that punishment happens, okay? So it's the immediate inconvenience, whatever is happening immediately, may or may not be something from God. Whether it is or not, the remedy is still to pray to God, and we cast our burdens on Him. Okay? When our burdens are too big for us, and they always are, what's our response? Cast the burdens on Him. Let Him take care of it, because He's got the ability to do something about it when we don't. That doesn't mean we should do nothing. George, you're going to say something here.
Well, I'm just thinking, we should and do believe prayer works. Now, we wouldn't want to experiment with this, but
No, because you don't put God to test.
If we all stop praying, if all Christians stop praying for each other, do we feel like that would have do we believe that would have a negative impact on people's lives, including their physical lives? And I'm inclined to say yes.
Yeah.
But am I inclined to say that when people are sick, it's because though we are praying, we are not righteous enough? That's the other end of the spectrum, kind of the other consequence of going the other direction. And I'm not really.
Look at things on a line this way, and it's a five-dimensional.
And that's where that's kind of actually where I'm going with this, in the sense that it is beyond my understanding, but at the same time, I have to believe that it works.
Yeah. If you didn't believe it, would you really have any right to call yourself a Christian? I don't think you would. I don't think you would. It's just like, well, I'm a follower of Jesus, but I think he was wrong about sodomite marriage. Well, come on.
The truth has to stand on it.
That's right. That's right. So, the fact, Gary.
Who's to say that such an act isn't also for ourselves as well, to engage in that act?
The prayer.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
We
really
see
good point.
all kinds of, name a figure, God has them do something. It's ultimately for an external purpose, but half the purpose is to help them too.
That's right. And God is a being that can operate in all the dimensions necessary to bring those things together, right? He works all things together for good for those that love the Lord. He is able to do that. Are we able to do that? No. I mean, we are stuck. We're stuck in that two-dimensional mirror, okay? And He is not. Okay? We're an image.
Was it Gary, personal deal? Was it Hezekiah who was told he was going to die?
Yep.
Okay, so Hezekiah is told he was going to die, which he would not have known if he had not been told, right? And then, he appeals to God to remember him. I mean, he does. He prays, remember the words that I've done for you. And then he is told, which he would not have known if he had not been told, his life has been extended 15 years. Now you can look at this from the perspective of one day, 15 years before Hezekiah was going to die, God said this thing that prompted an attitude in him. But that's a little unfair. In a way, we can see that regardless of the inevitable, the knowledge and the prayer that resulted of that was helpful for Hezekiah's attitude.
Yeah. And so that is part of the benefit that prayer brings to us, right? So, and guess what the outcome of, like what George just said in the case of Hezekiah, and really how it extends to all of us. Unless the Lord comes first, you're all going to die.
That's right.
Unless He comes first, there's not one person in this room that's getting out of this alive.
I've heard you make this point before.
Yeah.
From the day you were born.
Yeah. That's right. You're in the process of dying. Okay? Unless the Lord comes first. And you're still in that process. But the Lord may show up before that happens. So the idea of this prayer, a proper prayer, part of what it's going to do is it's going to bring us back to our senses and help us remember we are here. God is much greater than what we are, and we cannot do this ourselves. It's outside of us who's greater than us that can make things fit together for us. We remember His providence, right? And so that in and of itself is a restorative process. Whether we get well from that sickness or not, there is a spiritual sense that prayer restores us it reminds us of that. Okay? Now, the faith either kind of, go ahead, Gary.
Just before you move on.
Yeah.
Because the sick here, I mean, is it possible that he's also referring to the spiritual sick?
I think it has application across the board.
Okay, that
Using
sickness in that way.
primarily for that. Now, he does say, hey, restore the one who's sick, and the Lord will raise him up, and if he has committed sins, they will be forgiven him. So he's definitely pulling a spiritual lesson out of this as well. Okay? But the faith healer that we see out there, the guys on TV hitting people in the head and doing all kinds of stuff like that, their claim is that, hey, if you have sufficient faith, then they have the ability to bring about this healing without the need of a doctor.
But if you know what they're doing.
Well,
If you're not well, if you're sick.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, among other things. So years ago, and I don't know how many years ago it was, but I do remember a news story where a set of parents they believed in faith healing, but their son was sick. They refused medical attention for him, and he died. Okay, and they were put on trial. And this kind of really gets into, the power of the government, the power of the parents, and so it's kind of a dicey area. But this disease is something that was just like very easily curable thing. Okay, but they put on trial. I don't remember the outcome of the trial. I wish I did. Other than the child was dead. But here's the thing. When I watched the news reports on it and everything else, the parents would be walking out of the courtroom or whatever. Well, they both wear glasses. And to me, that I thought, no, wait a minute. If you really honestly believe in faith healing, throw those things away. Why are you recognizing that it won't work on your eyesight? Okay? But that the faith healing itself and the prayer is sufficient for your child. And that's the dilemma that I saw when I, would watch this. It's like, you don't really believe in faith healing. Because if you did, you wouldn't be wearing glasses. Okay? And that, that may have some problems with it too, but that's kind of what impressed me. Now, turn over to Matthew, chapter 9. There are a number of, this whole issue is also at least a class or maybe 3 months to sort of cover it. In Matthew 9, verse 9, start there. And starting in verse 9 to really get the context down through verse 12. As Jesus passed on from there, he saw a man called Matthew sitting in the tax office, and he said to him, "Follow me." And he rose and followed him. And it happened that as he was reclining at the table in the house, I think this to be Matthew's house, but behold, many tax gatherers and sinners came and were dining with Jesus and his disciples. And when the Pharisees saw this, they said to the disciples, "Why is your teacher eating with the tax gatherers and sinners?" Okay, this is kind of a setup into the context, and here's what he responds. When he heard this, Jesus said, "It is not those who are healthy who need a physician, but those who are sick." Okay? He is using a kind of a secular example of real life there to make a spiritual point. The spiritual point is that I, Jesus, came to act like a physician for people's souls because they're sinful. Okay? In the same way that a person who is sick needs a doctor. Okay, so what he's really saying is, hey, look, if you're sick, you need a doctor. If you are in sin, you need me, Jesus. Okay, because Jesus is the only one that can heal them. Okay? Now, there are all kinds of things about the woman with an issue of blood. Okay, there are all kinds of examples of people that are not healed with the doctor. Okay, and that goes on until today. There's some things, we've got a dear sister, guess what? They've not been able to do a thing for her. In everything that they have done, they've not done a thing for her. When I was growing up, the fellow that preached across the street from where I lived, okay? They finally just said, you know what? You've got Steve Saxon disease. His name was Steve Saxon. we don't have a clue as to what's wrong with you. There is nothing we can do for you. And he lived with that from the time that I was, 15 years old to whenever it was he died, probably 15 years ago. So he probably lived with Steve Saxon disease. He'd been to all kinds of doctors. We don't have a clue. Okay? So the fact that there's a doctor doesn't mean it's a guarantee that you're going to be healed either. Okay? God's providence, you've got to leave some of that to God's providence and God's decision making about what is going to happen there. So it is not it's not a guarantee that a physician is going to could heal you, but the combination of, when you're sick, you need to pray. Jesus says when you're sick, you need a doctor. Okay? Both of these things are appropriate things, appropriate responses for a person who is sick. Now in back in verse 14, they talk about the elders coming and anointing that person with oil. Okay? There was not a lot of high-tech medicine back then. Okay? And this is one of the things that they would do, apparently, and I don't know if this is a medicinal thing, but the point was that the oil has some sort of a healing power to it. It may have been just let us go and comfort that person. Pray over that person, show concern for that person, okay, and help them deal with the time where they're going to be suffering. And it may be a short time, it may be a long time, we don't know, but this is something that we can do to help that person endure, okay? Trying to go back to the idea of endurance and patience and suffering. So, it may be the doctor that will help. It's like, if you just do this, you have this amount of chance. If you just do this, you have this amount of chance. If you do both those things together, I think the message of what he's talking about here is do both of those things together. Okay? Keep both of those things working together, and then see what the outcome is. Yeah, part of the whole thing, don't forget in the whole outcome that God cares for us. And we'll make all those things work together for those that love him. And so make sure you're in that category that loves him and is doing it. So far as the doctor is concerned, I told the story before about the guy who's in the flood. He's up on his roof, and the boat comes, and he says, "Go away, God will save me." And another boat comes, "Hey, we're here to rescue you. Go away, God will save me." And another boat comes, "Go away, God will save me." And he drowns. And he gets to heaven, and he asks God, "Why did you save me?" And I sent 3 boats. Okay? God provided that for his salvation, but he was looking for a different kind of salvation. So it didn't work out. The story says he's in heaven questioning God. But the example, the example is the important thing. God's providence can work in different ways. It may be just prayer, but it might also be that doctor. It can just That's right. That's right. And so I think we need to avail ourselves of what we can. We need to understand that there's some quackery out there. There's some voodoo type things, okay? We're not talking about those voodoo type witch doctor sorts of things to get involved in that. But God let a lot of things in the past 2,000 years be discovered about medicine. I'm convinced there's still a lot more to be discovered about medicine that we don't know. And yeah, Jonathan.
A lot of miracles that were done for solving health problems or otherwise was doing this, like with naming the
Right.
liver thing, or with the liver with the oil.
Yeah.
Go get the pots and pour it. He was trying to get the widow money. He could have just made money up here, but there was something that he had to do.
Right.
So,
As a-
maybe the something is seeing a doctor.
I mean, part of that
It
thing with the
a miraculous thing to come out of it, but God expects us to do things.
right. In both the case of the Naaman and the widow's oil, what's the test that's going on? You have a living faith or a dead faith? Because a living faith takes action. Okay? And it's the living faith that made those things come about. And that's true, of all of God's people through time. Noah, the example is all over out there. Sometimes sickness is the result of sin, right? Okay, there's sin. There's, you know, alcoholism, things like that. There may be physical healing that is needed in conjunction with the forgiveness of those sins, and that's something that I think he's also trying to address here. So. Okay, verse 16. Confess your sins to one another, pray for one another so you may be healed. The effective prayer of a righteous man can accomplish that. Confess sins and pray one another so that you can be healed. Faith without works, works without faith. Okay, those are kind of a parallel to me, and I think it's just James' way of bringing the same sort of an idea. Okay, the idea of living faith.
The idea you can't do this on your own. You need help.
Okay.
We all need help.
Okay.
We all have a nature like Elijah's.
That's
we're subject to depression and
Yeah.
sinful behavior, and hey, we need help.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the idea that we think we don't. In the last half of that verse 16, the King James says, "The effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much." New American Standard, the effective prayer of a righteous man. I think I actually like the King James a little better in this regard. The effective prayer of a righteous man can accomplish much, and the New American Standard kind of seems to say the same thing twice. What defines it as effective? Well, it availed much. Okay, what means it avails much? Well, it must have been effective. So it seems a little circular. The King James says they're fervent. The idea that, you know, this is one of those, you know, your heart's in grief. Okay, when Samuel, no, not Samuel, Elijah is in the temple. The woman is praying. Samuel's mother. He thinks she's drunk. Is that the? Is it Eli? Oh, Eli. Yeah, Eli. And Hannah. Yeah.
Drunk.
Yeah. He thinks Hannah's drunk. Why? Because she's in anguish. Okay. That's what I think of when I think of a fervent prayer. That's the kind of anguish I'm talking about. Okay. That kind of prayer can accomplish a lot of things. So.
I'm sorry, I kind of lost.
Okay.
Back where we are exactly. What verse are you?
Well, we're kind of in the second half of 16. The effective prayer of a righteous man can accomplish much. Are you there? Okay. Okay. Any other questions through 16 points? Okay. And then 17 and 18 addressed it briefly. Prayed earnestly that it might not rain, and did not rain on the earth for 3 years and 6 months. Prayed again, and the sky poured rain, and the earth produced its fruit. That's a pretty natural example. This is one of the reasons I think that, in terms of who was James' target audience when he wrote this in the first century, if he had written this to Greeks, would they have understood what this is all about?
Nope.
No. It's just not part of their historical database in their heads, okay? But a Jewish Christian would understand immediately, oh, yeah, I remember that. Oh, yeah, okay. And they would get the point immediately. As a prayer is very effective, so.
I like that puts in there. Elijah was like, he's like the rest of us. He's not some, idol or whatever.
Yeah, that's right.
Hey, he was like the rest of you guys.
Yeah.
Rest of us.
Yeah. He was a man. A little bit further on in 1 Kings 17 there, where the story of Elijah. I think the next thing is the woman's son that dies. Okay.
After he said that.
Yeah. And so he goes on to bring that boy back to life. Prayer and action.
Secondary to the Elijah was a man of nature like ours. Him praying and then it not raining, I think is a very good example for a lot of the Christian world who is miracle this, miracle that, miracle absolutely everything. And it really, I see it as limiting God to what I think God can only do, only make things happen if he steps outside of space and time.
Right.
To make something happen. If someone can view it as a coincidence, it's pretty confirming miracle. And droughts happen. God wanted a drought here, and he made a drought happen. Anybody else who didn't believe in God could say, not functional with that. The fire comes out of heaven and consumes a bunch of Baal prophets. Nobody's denying what they just saw.
Right.
So, God wants something to happen. Sure, he do a miracle right now if he wants to. I don't think he's going to. I think he proves his word. I think that's a miracle before. But I have no doubt he can do it. I don't think he needs to do it. He's got other ways to accomplish.
Right.
And who are we to say, my elbow got better? It was a miracle. Or he made your body heal.
Yeah, yeah. But he's referred to the elbow because of my elbow. It's like, it's a miracle I didn't get hurt worse. Is it really a miracle? I'm glad I didn't get hurt worse. I'm thankful I didn't get hurt worse, but
Miracle you didn't land on me.
There's the instance when one of the armies at some point comes along to, I can't remember where we studied this recently, I don't know if I was this wrong or not, comes to attack, and prayer and consternation happens inside the city, and the next morning, like 160,000 men from the field dead. This was here. Here it said something about it. I can't remember what it was here studying it.
you're Canadian.
Here in Canada. Okay.
Also trying to recall.
Is that what it was?
I'm not.
See, I can't remember why I would have been studying this.
Is this in the context of the, tomorrow, on this day, an ephah of flour will be...
No, I don't remember that specifically. I just remember that the city's being attacked and prayer occurs inside the walls that they somehow survive this and they're preparing to fight the next day and they're enormously overwhelmed. The next morning they get up and the entire camp has been destroyed by illness and the king and what few remain travel home again. And as Don was saying, I was thinking about that as an instance of it. If the people behind the wall were praying that somehow we would be able to overpower them, somehow, one-tenth that will surround them and I'll be able to stab enough guys that we'll see here. And you can't look at that and say that God didn't answer the prayer. It must have been a natural occurrence.
Right.
Particularly with our inspired narrative here, we understand that God did that. But even so, somebody would, my prayer wasn't answered, something natural happened. We didn't need God this time.
Right.
The answer came differently than what my accomplished was requested.
And even in the time of Elijah, when he was praying about the rain, I'm not convinced everybody in the country knew that he had prayed for the rain. Okay? So what about somebody who had not heard that? We're 3.5 years into a drought, and it's never rained the whole time? This is highly unusual. Okay? At the very least, this is highly, highly unusual. Perhaps they would hear when Elijah prayed that rain would come. That would be how they would learn how. Okay? But we in a sense, for purposes of understanding, we separate what God does miraculously from what he does naturally. And what he does just in natural provision we call his providence. Okay? And so, since we don't know when God's providence is there and when it is not, what do? Give thanks in all things. So, okay. Good to go? 19 and 20. My brethren, if any among you strays from the truth, and one turns him back, let him know that he who turns a sinner from the error of his way will save his soul from death and will cover a multitude of sins. And then, the end. This is one of those books that ends so abruptly. You just kind of want to, wait a minute, I want more. It's a little bit like Acts. Acts just kind of seems like, okay, where's the third book? And for James, it's like, okay, where's the other half? Because I know it just feels like James would have had a lot more to say right now. So, anyone among you? So again, he's writing to Jewish Christians, and he identifies the possibility that somebody has strayed from the truth. Are they a Christian? Yes, they have strayed from the truth. You cannot stray from the truth unless you are in the truth to begin with. Okay, that's I think a key point here. In verse 20, he describes this person. Let's see, as a sinner following error. Okay, a sinner from the error of his way. Okay, so this is somebody. To me, it kind of falls into they've either endorsed bad doctrine or they're engaging in sinful behavior. I think that I can't think of anything else any other possibility really that would, you know, that would come up that would make me make a third category there. I'm not sure if the two categories are helpful. They're the ones that I put in my mind. But the point of what he's saying is that person needs to be turned back, okay, for the saving of their soul. So their soul be saved from death and their sins covered and forgiven. That's the point of what is happening here. So the goal is to turn that person back. So what is this? I mean, it's clear, right? Okay. What is it from a Calvinist perspective? You know, the idea of perseverance of the saints. No one can snatch it from my hand. And the Bible says that. I understand that. I don't discount that a bit. But putting perseverance of the saints on that verse and ignoring all the other things that are out there, to say that nothing can make you fall away, that you're once saved, always saved, I have a problem with that. Okay. He's clearly talking about a brother in the Lord who is strayed from the truth, and they've got to be turned around. Okay. And then what I did is just thumb through my Bible. It took about 20 minutes or so to go through the New Testament. I kind of keep those notes about here's a point of Calvinist doctrine that is refuted by the teaching of Jerusalem. And there's the verses that I came across in a very short period of time. There's things out there that make really the same point. Okay, that you can stray from the truth. You can fall away and need to be restored. So there are a number of ways you could approach that, you know, from you know, the whole Calvinist framework. But to me, this is probably the first and most obvious one. So, okay. Any questions?
It's interesting. James was not refuting Calvinism. He
That's right, yeah.
was stating an absolute truth
Yeah.
of God.
Yeah.
Right? That other stuff came in later.
Yeah.
All Peter spends the entire second letter, well, not the entire second letter, but good point of dealing with what? False teachers.
Yeah.
Because he said they're going to come in. Paul told these others, they're going to come in. They're going to be among you.
Among
They're going
you.
to come in. They're going to grab pieces of this and that, and they're going to twist it and pervert it, and they're going to lead some of you away. James states an absolute truth. This is absolute truth. You know, when you start doing all this other, you're going to trick people. So be on guard for that.
Yeah.
That would have been James's next two chapters, right? Watch out for the heretics who come in.
Yeah. Could you give us a list of what those are? Well, the minute we had that list, somebody would dream up something that's not in that list, right?
Yeah.
And so instead of dealing with it down here or up here at the evidence level of, you know, the practical side necessarily, where does he go to? Establishing the principle down here. Because once we establish the principle down here and the principle's clear, then it refutes all of the stuff that can come up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Verse 20. Okay, now I'm thinking about my question is kind of based in concepts like the verse talking about those who teach will incur greater condemnation, that kind of thing. So have that in the back of your head. Know that whoever brings back a sinner from his wandering will save his soul from death and cover a multitude of sins. His being the wanderer?
Yes.
Is it that obvious?
I think it is.
Okay.
I've heard people argue that the other way.
I'm not trying to argue the other way.
Yeah,
I've
yeah, yeah.
never thought about it before.
Yeah. In fact, I remember having that question one of the very first times I stumbled across that verse.
Okay.
But
So-
on the other side of that, the person, like Ezekiel on the wall, if I see someone who's in sin and I do nothing about it, and
Yeah.
I know to do something about it, then that's on my head.
That's right.
I have
Yeah, it's not Ezekiel telling himself though, it's God telling
That's
Ezekiel.
God telling me, right? So God's telling each of us, if you see a brother who's in sin and you do nothing about it, hey, you're responsible.
Yeah.
You've got to help turn it back.
Yeah.
If it meant the savor, and will cover a multitude of the savor will cover a multitude of sins. It could be future. In other words, you nip this in the bud, and you're gonna cut off a whole lot of trouble and angst and sin down the road. But I'm inclined to agree with you. The first inclination here is definitely the simple one.
Yeah, not that I know much about grammar, but the standard thing in grammar is when you see you kind of referred to the very most preceding, the closest preceding pronoun. Is it really a pronoun? His is not a pronoun, is it? It is? Okay. So to trace his back, the error of his way, well, you work back and, oh, we're talking about the sinner. I don't know that it's necessarily always true. Okay. Now, and I think the presumption in verse 20 is that he who turns that person away is in a state of grace right now, right? They're not dealing with this sin that has caused this other person to fall away, with the exception of trying to treat it. Okay, they're trying to get that person back, but the person who does that turning doesn't need his sins forgiven at the moment. His sins have already been forgiven. He doesn't need his sins forgiven. God already did that. So he's helping this other person recognize what they're saying and carry it back. Garrett, you look like you have a question.
I was thinking as far as the case of the type of word for that pronoun, they would generally default in English to nominative subject. Whereas, yeah, so we've pretty much lost our case system. This is where Latin can help a little bit.
Yeah.
It's just like to say the brother would be the accused case, which, you know, if you're using a pronoun in English, it's going to default to the other, unless there's some other contextual indication.
Right. Yeah, that's what I say. I'm not saying it's always be that way, but if it's not, the context will make it very clear that it's not. So, otherwise, you wouldn't have to repent for your own sins. You just help everybody else with theirs, and your own sins would be covered, right? And you can continue to go on and do. No, we can't get there. Can't get there from what it says here, or what it says anywhere else. Okay. Here I stole all your time. I think we can. You want to read through First Peter, or okay? Thank you all.